For a game made in 1989, it's a miracle this works as well as it does. This review likely does contain some spoilers for Sweet Home. I don't think there's a lot, but there might be some, so just a heads up. Sweet Home is hailed by many as a groundbreaking survival horror game, and playing it for the first time, I can certainly see why. All of the telltale signs of a good survival horror game are here. The feeling of item scarcity, when there really isn't, the feeling that each encounter with a monster could be your last, especially at the start of the game, and the uncertain game controls and mechanics that can leave you guessing, but in a good way. And, did I mention, it does all of this while being a JRPG at its core? It's crazy this game works, and my teenage developer brain, who always wanted to do something like this, is very jealous. Released in 1989 by Capcom, this groundbreaking game was actually based on a movie with the same names.
献身と身も凍る恐怖の織りなす48時間呪いの背後に潜む暗黒の支配者のまがまがしい正体とは何か本格ホラー大作スイートホーム
And, with rare exceptions, games based on movies don't turn out this well, but Sweet Home seems to have exceeded its source material and is generally hailed better than the movie. The game is seen as a precursor and major inspiration to Resident Evil, so much that originally when Resident Evil was being created, it was slated to be a remake of this game. Both of these games, of course, were developed by Capcom. In some ways, it's hard to break down this game for review. Do I review it for the survival horror juggernaut that it is?
I'm the juggernaut!
Or do I comment on the, well, lackluster, and that's probably being overly harsh, JRPG that it is? Well, let's start with the good. Nay, great stuff that this game does. As a survival horror game, Sweet Home is wonderful and unsettling. There are lots of little traps along the way. There's little cave areas. I missed these. Help. I don't even know how to help these guys. But none of them are too game-breaking, mostly because you can save whenever you want. More on that later. There are a number of ways the game instills a feeling of dread. The first being that there are a limited number of resources in the game, so item management is of a huge importance. And the most important item to manage are your tonics, which can be used to restore you to full health. But there is a limit to them. Now, there are more than enough to get you through the game, but you don't know that, and you certainly don't know that in the beginning, so using one of these has a big cost in your brain. This is compounded by the fact that there are so many puzzles to solve all over the mansion, many which require clues and items from other rooms, which can lead you to spending more time wandering around, which means more encounters, which deplete your health, which makes you need more tonics, putting you in this cycle of fear, where exploring has a cost. Compounding this even further, and yes, we are using that word a lot, is the fact that each member of your party can only carry 2 items, which leads you to having to choose which items to carry, and which to leave behind. And if you leave the wrong items behind, that leads to more backtracking, which leads to more encounters, which leads to needing more tonics. Did I mention that if any of your characters die, they die a rather gruesome and permanent death? That's right, permanent death. So now might be a good time to talk about the characters and how they contribute to this resource cycle. There are 5 characters in your party, and be warned, I'm generally bad with names to begin with. Kaizu, Emi, Akito, Taro, and Asuka. Each of these characters have tools that can be used to help you progress throughout the game. Kazu has a lighter that can be used to start fires and burn ropes. Emi has a key that opens certain doors. There are more keys to find, and if you can't see the influence Resident Evil takes from this game, just watch Emi unlock a damn door. Taro has a camera, which only has one use, but it's an important use. We use it to photograph the frescoes, the art pieces around the mansion that give you hints. Asuka has a vacuum that can, well, clean up messes, and sometimes frescoes need to be cleaned up before a picture can be taken. Asuka and Taro end up being attached to the hip, mostly because Asuka can clean these frescoes before Taro takes a picture of them. Lastly, Aikido, the nurse, has a med kit that can heal various status effects, but will not restore your HP. Aside from their items, these characters play identical, though female characters do have a bit less HP than the male characters. But how does this contribute to the ever-important cycle? Well, there are 5 characters, and the most you can team together at a time is 3. So, inevitably, you will usually have a party of 3 and 2. And if you encounter a roadblock with one set of characters that need the item from another, well, that's more backtracking and more HP down the drain, which means, oh my god, we have to use one of our limited tonics. Oh, and remember that permadeath thing? Well, if one character dies, you can find replacement items to fill in for the dead character, but doing so loses you 3 item slots, 2 of the character that had already died, and 1 for the replacement items. I never actually checked if you lose items when a character dies, because I just pushed reset.
Just this once! Everybody lives!
Another thing this game does well, that seems like it shouldn't at first blush, is all of the music is extremely unsettling. It doesn't even sound good when you first hear it, yet somehow it grows on you as you listen to it. The very first piece of in-game music is a great example of this. You listen to it, and immediately I am dreading having to hear this on repeat for the next 30 minutes. But after a bit, it gets stuck in your ear. The exception being the music in the final area, which rocks hard and rides free, as Mr. Halford would say. Really, who am I to doubt prime 8-bit Capcom music? Sweet Home includes another survival horror staple, or at least a staple of the earlier Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. It can be confusing, and the clues can leave you wondering what exactly you need to do. It rarely reaches a point where it's game-breaking, except for needing to find the mallet near the start of the game. The mallet, of course, is hidden under a table, and the hint you get isn't exactly helpful. I also spent the first 20 minutes of the game trying to understand how to pick up items. Oh look, it's another one of them knives that I can't pick up or do anything with. Silver. How do I pick it up? Before I actually had to look it up on how to do it. Maybe if I had a game manual, it would have helped me, but this is 2022, and no one has time to read. Plus, I'm not sure the manual would have been translated anyway. The one fundamental mistake I think this game makes, which is fixed in Resident Evil 1 and used brilliantly in Alien Isolation, is that you can save anywhere, at any time, and as often as you'd like. So if a character dies, no worries, just reset and you'll get them back. A character is cursed and Aikido isn't around? You fall into one of the many traps? There isn't any need to make that difficult choice. The choice of, is a character's death worth the progression you have made? Unless you forget to save. The last 10 minutes of our last playthrough, forgot to save. So what does this game not do so well? Well, it's 2 things really. But those 2 things are kind of combined together. It's not really a great JRPG. The first major sin Sweet Home has is something that's shared with a couple other great games, but the first one that comes to mind is the Fallout series, past Fallout 3. For the first couple of levels, say from level 1 to level 7, the game is stressful and difficult. But once you clear these hurdles, battles start to become an afterthought. And to be fair, this is a common problem I've encountered in other survival horror games. Silent Hill 2 immediately comes to mind. The fundamental difference being that Silent Hill is a quote, action game, unquote, whereas this is a quote, JRPG, unquote. So going through the motions is a bit more mundane. The second sin here is that as an RPG, it's really basic. And if this game weren't such a fantastic horror game, this flaw would be exposed significantly more. As with most RPGs, you have hit points and magic points. Well, prey points here. Except for very specific situations, your prey points don't matter, and it's only ever your HP that does. In combat, all of your characters will move before the enemy, meaning once you get strong enough, combat becomes meaningless because you will kill your enemy before they inflict a penalty on you. Your characters can equip weapons that you find around the mansion, which boost the damage and can protect you from curses in combat. But since you can save anywhere, even if you are cursed, it really doesn't matter. And there are no real boss encounters where having protection from curses really matters to you. Now, there are still some pretty decent tricks your enemies can pull. If they stun you, all of your party's attacks will do damage to that one stunned character and not the enemy, which can lead to a character dying if you're not paying attention. Wait, Kaiser died? And they can also blow a character away to a different part of the mansion, which will leave them alone and vulnerable. But you will only need to fight one monster at once, so strategy isn't that deep. One neat thing you could do is call other party members for help, which has them run over to your party to join the battle. I really enjoy this mechanic, I think it's pretty neat, but I only really did this to ensure all my party members received XP, since the battles themselves weren't that difficult. Now, I know we just spent some time running this game down a bit and pointing out its flaws, but I am floored by how well this came together, and I've never really played anything like it. It excels at the most important aspects. It's unsettling, unnerving, and I'll admit that it got me with a jump scare. And, most importantly, it was fun. This game was ambitious as hell, and while there are other horror RPGs out there, this is the first one I've ever played, and wonder if they would have ruined a bit of the tension if they made the JRPG elements deeper and gave the player a little more control, and therefore a little bit more safety. If I was to rate this today, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. But if I were to rate this in 1989, it would probably be a 9, or even a 9.5. Words can't express, or likely I just can't express, how wonderful of a game this is. Highly recommend if you're a fan of survival horror and want to see where it all came from. It's really quite interesting to see the mechanics that started here to be developed over time. Thank you for taking some time to listen to this. If you like it, leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll do some more reviews. Thank you.